This video is brought to you by Gear. Are you looking for a CF Express Type B card that is fast and affordable? Check out the Gear's Pro lineup, which can record high resolution and high frame rates without breaking a sweat. Gear offers a 512GB card for $199 and possibly even less with the discounts below. Get your Gear CF Express cards today. In this video, I'm going to try to answer a question. If you weren't tied to any system, which camera should you buy? The Sony FX30 or the Panasonic GH6? One is an entry-level Super 35 cinema camera from Sony. The other is a flagship-level Micro Four Thirds sensor camera from Panasonic. Despite being an entry-level cinema camera, the FX30 is really Sony's first high-end APS-C camera that came out late 2022 that has dual card slots that's mainly focused on video. Same amazing body as the FX3, while the GH6 is a video-centric camera that came out mid-2022, not far off. Two very strong offerings for both brands. Let's start off with the FX30. Smaller body with larger sensor, every Asian's dream. Gyro data, apparently the video industry standard. A path to full frame. Being on the E-mount system, you have access to full frame E-mount cameras. Focus mapping, breathing compensation, dual CF Express Type A cards, and the reason I bring this up is because the Panasonic has only one CF Express Type B and an SD card. Battery life, both cameras have big batteries, however Sony is just more efficient with this battery. The body is lighter. Yes, it has a bigger sensor and it's lighter. The body has mounting points. You can mount accessories, external monitor, whatever you want to the outside of the camera itself. You have access to the ecosystem. That means aside from the lens, you have the audio mount, you have the Bluetooth remote. Small, simple things, but you don't have that with Panasonic. And last but not least, you have the amazing autofocus. Sony is known for their autofocus, and for good reason, because it works really well. Advantages for the GH6, you have 100 megapixels handheld high resolution photos. You have 300 frames per second slow motion. You have an actual EVF. You have an actual mechanical shutter, and you have IBIS that is class leading. This thing really works even better than active stabilization. Open gate. I find it odd that a 3x2 sensor is limited to only using a 16:9 portion. With Panasonic, you're not limited to that small portion, and it'll come clutch if you're doing other stuff like anamorphic. Other features include waveforms, which is a more normal way for video shooters to expose. You've got shutter angle. You can just set it and forget it. It's really easy to use. You've got free Varicam LUTs. You have a lot of options with that. You don't have to buy some LUT pack from some influencer. You've got ProRes recording in camera. Yes, you can do ProRes in camera. You don't need a fancy external monitor. You can do SSD recording. So you can have your entire project on an SSD card while recording it. Yeah, that's really cool. You have a more robust codec selection. You're not limited to H.265 at 24 and 60 and 120 Sony. The customization for video is a bit better, and I'll get to that portion a little bit later in the video. Tilt articulating screen is a screen of choice for all shooting scenarios. Similarities of the FX30 and GH6. Their lens selections. While they're different mounts, they offer a huge selection because of the years of investment they've been doing. Both cameras offer 4K 120, which is glorious. They both offer active cooling for extremely long record times and pretty much overheat resistance. They have good rolling shutter performance. Both cameras offer full-size HDMI. You're not getting skimped with that little thing. Both cameras have tally lights so you can know when you're recording. Both cameras have 10-bit video, LUT monitoring, and 6K sensor. However, these cameras behave a little bit different when it comes to the sensor. So let's break down the lens selection. Sony E-mount and Micro Four Thirds. The biggest selection of mirrorless lenses based on years of existence. Sony probably has more overall selection, but a lot of them will come at a size, weight, and cost factor because the majority are made for full frame. While full frame lenses work for APS-C, you are going to pay more. It will be heavier, it will be bigger, and they are intended for a full frame field of view, which may be considerably different than APS-C. That said, APS-C Sony does offer good variety. With Micro Four Thirds, you are going to find more variety of long lenses fully optimized for that sensor. The wider lenses for Micro Four Thirds are a bit more fickle. They have f2.8 zooms, but they can be much larger for close to the equivalent of APS-C. It's an odd dynamic. Micro Four Thirds covers a lot of ground. They just didn't have a plethora of options on the wide end, and they make it up with the primes and telephoto. They have significant offerings that range from dirt cheap to OMG, this is more expensive than full frame. They also offer an unusual amount of slower lenses in the standard range. Unfortunately, I wouldn't be able to go through all of the Micro Four Thirds options in one video. Just know that Sony APS-C is probably stronger on the wide end. Micro Four Thirds is probably stronger on the long. Drawbacks for both cameras: 4K 120 limitations. The FX30, you're incurring that big crop. Active stabilization doesn't work anymore. I don't believe clear image zoom works either. With the GH6, the dynamic range boost is not working. Your AF goes to, it gets worse. Another limitation is that neither camera takes battery grips. These are power hungry devices and they can really use a battery grip. USB-C probably isn't the best way to power it, but it's an option. It's just that thing dangling there, you can get it damaged. And so why buy the FX30? While the Sony may seem inferior on specs, the things it does right may weigh more for you. Like the sensor size, like the Sony level AF, which is hard to trip up, like the battery life, because these aren't full cinema rigs with external power supply. They are nimble devices. You're going to get 30 to 50% more battery life with the FX30, and throughout the day that means less changing and less stress. The mounting points, the ecosystem, Sony takes care of the basic power user in major ways. You've got pre-cooked LUTs, which eases up editing just a bit. You've got Cine EI, which helps you with dual gain ISO. Oh right, the dual gain ISO, just for a bit of low light advantage. On top of the sensor being larger, these factors generally appeal to a wider audience. So why buy the GH6? A video centric workflow. The amount of times you need manual controls without an overbearing complexity. If you're okay with a smaller sensor or part of the sensor size doesn't matter delusion, then Micro Four Thirds camera offers a ton of recording ability. I believe every frame rate can be used with H.264 or H.265 up to 300 frames per second, by the way. You can do in-between frame rates of 48p, you can do ProRes in camera, just globs of filming options that gets very close to a dedicated cinema rig. Not only can you do more codecs, Panasonic has a spectacular recording quick menu that makes it a breeze to switch modes. It's fast, you don't really need custom menus. 4K 30 long up to 4K 120 all intra, 2 clicks. 4K 120 to 4K 60 anamorphic, 2 clicks. Alright, with OpenGate the camera is designed for 2x anamorphic. The square style sensor is also easier to use for vertical video. Last but not least, you can take photos. The camera has a mechanical shutter and the AF is going to be less of an issue because you can simply use brute force. You can take a lot of frame rates and you have plenty of keepers. So which one should you buy? Being part of the E-mount system, it's a lot easier for a full frame FX3 owner to add a FX30 to the system, while L-mount and Micro Four Thirds are completely different. You can't share. And on the flip side, the GH6 can be your A camera, and there are a lot of options for an inexpensive B camera. The GH5, the GH5 Mark II, the Olympus cameras, there are a lot of options that have been ahead of the curve for a long while now. The GH5 is a 10-bit camera, it's no slouch. The autofocus for Panasonic cameras, well, that's not for the faint of heart. It's a real issue for those that operate unmanned rigs. But then again, having an unmanned rig is in itself a risk in many scenarios. That's like giving your bank account details to your wife. Oddly enough, the more powerful autofocus machine, the FX30, also has the better manual focus controls. With manual focus map, you are working much faster and there is no confusion when you're trying to manual focus quickly. The second or primary camera debate can be a bit tricky because the FX30 is only the beginning. I am confident Sony will be expanding their APS-C offerings. They already laid the groundwork with their latest prime offerings and lenses. Tamron and Sony have solid f2.8 zooms, and I would say that Sony is only missing their own f2.8 ultra wide zoom and offers more compelling lenses that are often less expensive, better matched for the smaller sensor. First-party Panasonic and OM lenses can be very pricey, and there are very unique offerings like the 10-25, which offers a 20 to 50mm 35mm equivalent focal range at a fast aperture. Olympus has the 8-25 and 12-100 with the equivalent 35mm range of 16 to 50 and 24 to 200 with constant aperture. Micro Four Thirds has a lot of standard zooms from slow to fast that start at 12mm, the 24 equivalent, while E-mount has two, which is the 16 to 50 and 16 to 55, which are extreme ends of the spectrum. Micro Four Thirds has an odd dynamic of being a smaller sensor that has a lot of slow lenses, which is absolute trash in low light. But at the same time, it's heck of a travel lens kit. Their fast lenses are too big and expensive in my opinion, and because of that, full commitment might have you looking at different mount options. That's the only issue I see with the lens selection. And if you haven't gotten the theme by now, lenses are a large factor between the systems. Well, the GH6 can do photos, it offers higher frame rates, it has more video photo tools. And is that enough to overcome the larger sensor? Is it enough to overcome the autofocus system that Panasonic owners have been dreaming about? Is it enough to overcome the battery life and amazing form factor? At some point, your highest priority might be 10-bit video with the best AF and the largest sensor you can afford, and you want to get into even higher end cameras and lenses down the line. The FX30 gives you access to all of that. The simplistic nature of the Sony plug-and-play auto settings shotgun mic along with a very small 10-24 f4 with plug-and-play style AF power zooming abilities makes for a super travel kit that only weighs a bit more than the GH6 by itself. It's hard to recommend one over the other because practically both are great cameras that can be used in nearly any scenario with an army of lenses to support your every need. Will I be replacing the GH6 with the FX30? Very likely not. I like the GH6 for the same reason I use the A7 IV most of the time. The ability to use pixel to pixel, aka the equivalent of crop mode to get more framing abilities with less lenses. Every time there's a crop, you're using less of the sensor, and with pixel to pixel, I am aware of the drawback that I may be using a sensor that's smaller than a GoPro. And while it may make a better Bcam camera because I'm already an E-mount user, I don't really need a backup camera because the GH6 has its own backup camera and it's very inexpensive for a pro-grade camera alternative. And I'll do a future video on that camera, which will probably get no views. And I'll do it anyways because someone might find it useful. I will definitely get the FX30 to do a few comparisons with the GH6 and I might change my mind, but having used the A7S III and FX3 and knowing those cameras well, I'll need some convincing. Anyhow, hope you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching. Like, sub, share. See you in the next one. Take care.